Hello everyone and welcome back to the Green Developer channel. Today I'm going to spend the whole video just answering the questions that you asked for me on the video that I posted 2 weeks ago now, I think, to celebrate reaching 500 subscribers on this channel. So let's get right to it. Actually, before I get started answering those questions, I just want to say again a really big thank you to all of you who have either asked questions or just followed with my video and subscribed and just supported the channel in this way. It's really fun to see how much it's grown over the past couple months, and hopefully with your support I'm definitely going to keep going and posting more videos and, you know, try to make you all happy and find some stuff that's interesting for all of you. So again, thanks a lot, and let's get right to it. Keep in mind those are in no particular order. I just kind of pulled a couple on my phone that I wish to answer, and I'll just go through them and just ramble on without really anything planned about them. So first question comes from Dave Jacobson on YouTube, and sorry if I butcher your names, guys. I'm gonna do my best. So he asks on YouTube, what is your shorter and longer term goals with iOS development? Do you have dream companies or projects you would like to work on? For longer terms with iOS development, if you've been following this channel for a little while, my goal with you know, the channel itself and what I do with development has always been kind of to, you know, do something that has a positive impact on people and that has, you know, that adds values to people's lives, or, you know, how they work or whatever it might be. And so long term, what I hope to be doing with iOS development is just, first of all, build enough of an income with whatever I'm doing, whether it's, you know, the apps I build and I publish on the App Store, or the videos I post on YouTube here, whether it's sponsors or, you know, affiliate links to classes or whatever it might be. Just, you know, build a base of income that I can have so that I can basically just, you know, have that freedom of building whatever iOS projects I feel are interesting and bring value to people and, you know, are going to kind of keep me motivated to do some good, you know, and use the skills that I have and maybe share that idea and, you know, influence people, if you will, and, you know, make them aware of the fact that it's possible to do that kind of stuff and, you know, encourage them to do so for themselves too. So, I mean, I guess that's kind of my long-term goals for iOS development, just, you know, giving me the freedom to be able to build whatever I want and build the projects that I feel that are going to have a positive impact on people. And along with that, obviously he asked, do you have dream companies or projects you'd like to work on? I think that's kind of a weird answer, but the dream company or project I would like to work on is, you know, my own. I know I have the skills to go back and work in industry, no problem, and, you know, I'm taking the hard way, I guess, by trying to do something that's off the beaten path and just, you know, building my own projects and finding other ways of getting incomes and things like that. But there's a reason for that. There's plenty of companies that do great stuff and that have, you know, that reach the same idea of having positive impacts and whatnot. But I really like having the freedom of just creating what I like and, you know, exploring different paths with iOS development and content creation and whatnot. So there's some companies that I wouldn't mind working at if it comes to that, but I think the dream and really what I hope to be able to accomplish is just work on my own terms, and I guess maybe down the road, you know, start a company that would perhaps, you know, be in line with what I'm doing. I've always had that kind of idea of having maybe a non-profit that makes it a little bit more affordable for people that might not have the means to make it happen, to, you know, hire professional developers at maybe a lesser cost and, you know, have their projects come to life if they're projects that are worth, you know, building. So maybe that's in the cards for some time in the far, far future, and that would be a company that I wouldn't mind working at, but it's obviously kind of a pipe dream and something that, if it happens at all, will be in a really long time. But hopefully that answers your question. Okay, next question. Drayton De Silva asks on YouTube, which are your favorite fiction and non-fiction, not software or coding related books? Not necessarily which you think are the best, but the ones you really enjoyed, or which one impacted you the most personally. Let me get them, actually. Let's try to get them out in my library. All right, so let's get into it. My favorite fiction book of all time, and I even have it in French and in English, just to see the difference in the translation, because it's a really interesting book to see how the translation is made on, is a book called Flowers for Algernon, or however you call that in English. And it's basically a book about a guy that has a mental handicap and, you know, learning disabilities and whatnot. And through some kind of experimentation, they're able to give him not only like you know, average intelligence, but a superior intelligence than most people. And through the book, you kind of follow along his journals and how he goes through the transformation of, you know, kind of being happy as someone that's not super intelligent, and not necessarily becoming more happy as he becomes more and more intelligent, and you know, follows his story along on how it evolves and how it affects him. And kind of has had a big impact on me, because it does show that what a lot of people strive for, and, you know, what a lot of people, you know, try to achieve, and how they get into the rat race of trying to be the best and, you know, the most intelligent or the richest or the most successful and whatnot, isn't always, you know, what you have to strive for. And it's not necessarily going to make you the happiest when you reach, you know, whatever your initial goal is. There's more to life than just being the most whatever at whatever. So it has had a big impact on me, and it's honestly just a really fantastic book that I really like. Not gonna spoil it, but you should really go read it. It's a really fantastic book. As far as nonfiction is concerned, it's a little bit more difficult to answer, because I honestly don't read that much nonfiction that is not coding related, but one of the ones that's probably the only nonfiction book I've read more than once is this book by John Kabat-Zinn called Wherever You Go, There You Are, which is, you know, if you're not into that kind of stuff, you know, bear with me for a second, but it's a book on meditation, and, you know, kind of this esoteric and, you know, more practical approach to finding how, you know, meditation can work for you, and how you can implement the kind of ideas that go along with it in your daily life, and, you know, what bring it can do for you. And, you know, without getting into the, like, maybe less approachable ideas of meditation that, you know, Westerners aren't so good at dealing with. So yeah, it's a really good book. Again, just kind of, you know, a book that changes your mindset a little bit about a couple things about how you view life, and, you know, hopefully sticks enough to encourage you to live your best life in one way or another. All right, up next, Lennon Hughes on YouTube, which has been following me for quite a while, has asked, how did you know that you wanted to get into iOS development? What got you started in the world of programming? First of all, I think somebody asked a similar question, so I'm gonna, you know, skip to the end of your question and maybe come back to it when I answer that other person's question later down the road. How did I get started in the world of programming? There's something in Quebec where I live, between high school and university, where you kind of have your, I guess the equivalent of your more specific courses that you would get at the end of high school or the beginning of university. You know, like your more advanced algebra or calculus or physics, chemistry, psychology, whatever, those kind of classes. And you kind of pick a path and go through it before going to university. And so when I was in that, you know, transition school, which is called Cégep here, I picked a science, kind of more mathematics-based program with like physics and maths and things like that. And one of the mandatory courses within that program was a programming course, because, you know, obviously at this point in time, no matter what you're doing with applied science, you're probably going to have to do some amount of programming at some point, whether it's like MATLAB or, you know, just Maple or Python or whatever it might be. And so there was a mandatory class where we learned like basics of, you know, JavaScript, HTML, like tiny games and small websites that didn't do much and were ugly, but, you know, like badly formatted, like all one file, just kind of a rough introduction to programming, but it was how it got started, but, you know, just enough to get us started with programming and get comfortable with it a little bit more. And I think what happened within that class is First of all, I found it really easy and kind of just clicked with me. And at that point in time, I think I remember clearly being one of the only class that I took that I found myself thinking about how to problem solve things that I was, confronted with in that class outside of when I was working on the project. Like for example, I'd be like, I'd have a project, I'd have to hand it, and I wouldn't know how to solve one of the problems and figure out how to do something. And, I'd find myself kind of thinking about how I could go about doing it in the bus or taking a walk or whatever. And I think it kind of stuck with me that like that whole problem solving thing and how you can go about like finding ways to solve problems. And it wasn't like, clear cut how you go about things, and, you just had to be creative and find ways to make things work. Kind of really clicked with me and meshed with how I like to do things. And so, after kind of realizing that and going through that class and having fun with it and feeling like it was kind of easy for me and it just matched with how I think, I guess, that's when I decided to apply to study software engineering in university, and basically just went through a university degree after, and that's how I learned programming a little bit more in depth. Now, Code with Cal on YouTube asks, and like I said, kind of the same question as what Lyndon asked, why did you choose iOS development over other programming disciplines? Honestly, I went through a lot of stuff. You just kind of have to when you're going through a software engineering degree. I think they teach C++ first, and I had like a robotics class in my first year where we did C, and you just kind of get thrown into all those projects that use different languages and, different technology stacks and whatnot. So you can kind of get to see a couple of different things while you're going through your degree. At least that's how it was for mine. And so I got to see a lot of different things, and what ended up kind of happening is midway through my first internship, which was with embedded development work, working on, tiny embedded, microcontrollers and things like that, I had to do an app to showcase what the thing we were working on was doing, without getting too much into the details, but basically there had to be like a companion app to, what we were working on. And so as an intern, I was tasked with doing that, and so it kind of meshed with me, and I got more and more interested in it, learning Android development on my own afterwards, and eventually getting an internship with Android development, and by that point starting to learn iOS development and kind of sticking with it up to now. And the reason I kind of stuck with first mobile development is that I really enjoy the idea of being able to reach a wide audience and having a direct impact on them, and like I said earlier, have a positive impact on people and whatever with the work that I do. And I have no doubt that by working on like embedded stuff, or by working on automation things in a really big factory or whatever it might be, I could have a really big impact that way too. But I really enjoyed the fact that with mobile development, you get to have a much, closer proximity with the users and with regular people with the work that you're doing. Your aunt is never going to be using that factory automation thing, and even though it makes, things faster and maybe has a great impact on the environment because you manage things better afterwards, whatever, it's never going to be something that has a direct impact on consumers and, regular average people. And I feel like it's much easier to reach that and to do that with mobile development, and that's kind of just why I ended up liking the idea behind it and what it is, and why I went away from Android development and more towards iOS. Is just I think the iOS platform kind of meshes a little bit more with what I'm trying to do and what I believe in. It's not a secret for anyone that Google's there and Android's there kind of to collect a bit of data and make it easy to sell you ads after, and obviously Apple collects data too, but in that way, it's a little bit less about selling ads and things like that. It's more about selling their product directly to you, and in that sense feels a little bit better to me in some way, I guess, because they're a little bit more transparent about what they're trying to do, and it gets you to buy more Apple products and not whatever else might be the case with Google products and things like that. And finally, last question. I think I've already rambled on long enough. Hopefully this video doesn't turn out too long. I'm gonna do my best to keep it short-ish. and interesting for all of you, and hopefully it was. JenK16 on Instagram asks, I've done the basics, but it never sticks. It's like my brain won't remember code. Any help? And I feel like that's kind of a sentiment that I get a lot from people, beginners that are trying to learn development, whether it's iOS or any sort of programming language or whatever it might be. And the truth is, nobody remembers all the things. Most people, professionals, don't remember the basics either. I can't tell you how many times I've had to Google how to do a switch or a for loop in whatever programming language I'm using at that time. I've put in my time writing Swift code, and I've written many hours worth of code, and I still have things that I forget every now and then about how to do some things, even with the language I'm most used to. So it's just a misconception that you have to remember everything by heart, and that's really not what programming is about. If you've gone through the basics and you learn the basics of programming in whatever language it might be, the idea is never really to learn what the language is by heart. It's mostly about being made aware and remembering what tools are available to you and how to problem solve whatever you have in front of you. So the idea is not to remember the syntax of how to write an if statement to solve that problem. The idea is that you've gone through the basics and you now know that, if you have something in front of you that can go two ways depending on an entry, then you can use an if statement and an else statement to do one thing or another depending on what happens. And it's not about remembering how an if and else statement is written and having it, memorized by heart and being able to write it out. It's more about the idea of knowing that an if statement exists, and that's how you solve some of those questions that you might have and some of the problems that you need to face while you're programming. So I know it's a really stupid example because I think most people will remember by heart how to write an if else statement, but the same thing applies for how to use libraries or how to use APIs or how to write whatever piece of code that you want to write. It's a lot more about remembering what's available to you and how you can use those tools to problem solve, and how you can search for them online to be able to figure out whatever you're trying to solve, more so than remembering by heart everything you're trying to do. So don't worry about it. If nothing is kind of sticking in your head, that's not the point at all. You're trying to figure out while you're learning programming. Just go through it, learn to problem solve, try to remember what's available to you, and don't worry too much if you have to Google how to do like basic things, whether it's syntax or whatever else. I'm sure you remember a lot more than you think, and I'm sure it's sticking a lot more than you think, just because you might be sticking a little bit too much on, how the syntax is, and maybe doing typo errors while you're coding and thinking that that means that you're not a programmer. That's not how it works at all. Alright, so I hope this was helpful to some of you out there. I hope some of your questions were answered. I know I didn't answer everything, but I obviously don't want this to become like a 45-minute video of answering every single question that's been asked to me over the past few months. Hopefully it was useful anyway and you had fun watching this video. I will see you all next week, and until then, take care.